All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. We want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes for this show. And also a programming note, on Mondays and Thursdays during the 25-26 college basketball season, we will be coming to you at 1 o'clock Eastern on Inside College Basketball Now. But this Thursday, we are going to amend our time and come to you at 10 a.m. Eastern because we want to give you a preview show before all of the conference tournament games that day. So Thursday morning, we will be on the air at 10 a.m. Eastern on YouTube. Today and every other Monday, the next couple weeks, we'll be right here on CBS Sports Network at 1 o'clock Eastern. And also a reminder that in addition to these live shows on Mondays and Thursdays, Inside College Basketball Now will also be bringing you additional episodes featuring exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Michigan's Dusty May will be my guest 10 a.m. on Tuesday. You can check my social media coverage for all of that on Tuesday. And we will also hear from Dusty May later in this show. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we need you to be all you can be. So we want you to like, we want you to subscribe to all these shows and get with us on Apple and or Spotify if you can't be with us live during all the coverage we are going to give you here during March Madness. And as always, we start with three big things. And the first big thing I want to get to obviously centers on Selection Sunday, which is just 6 days away right now. And it is now a fact that 4 teams in college basketball have separated themselves from the rest of the sport. Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. You look at the scenario right now with the teams at the top of the bracket. Duke, Michigan, and Arizona are all cemented as number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Duke obviously in the pole position to be the top overall seed in the bracket on Sunday, headed to the East region where it will start in Greenville and then potentially play in Washington, D.C. during the second weekend of the tournament. Then you have to look at Michigan, a team that is 29-2, won an epic game on Sunday on CBS over Michigan State. Michigan obviously already a championship on its resume, a Big Ten regular season title. Michigan in a scenario where it will go to the Big Ten tournament this week in Chicago with a chance to move up to the top overall seed in the NCAA tournament if Duke were to stumble at the ACC tournament. And I think regardless of what happens in the Big 12 tournament for Arizona in Kansas City, you are going to see the Wildcats on the one line in the West region on Selection Sunday. Arizona won its 29th game of the season on Saturday night against Colorado in Boulder. A phenomenal performance offensively from freshman guard Braden Burries, who had 31 points. Regardless of what happens, Arizona is in position to be the top overall seed in the West region. Now, we got some clarity over the weekend over where things stand in the South region, and that's because Florida, who continues to be in a situation where it plays its best basketball at the right time of year under Todd Golden, went to Rupp Arena, controlled the game against Kentucky from tip to finish, won that game, and is now in a scenario where it is, in my opinion, projected to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament because UConn lost, obviously, to Marquette on Saturday. Now, the UConn loss to Marquette didn't just obviously rob the Huskies of the chance to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, but also we have a scenario where UConn lost the Big East regular season title, which now goes to St. John's for the second straight season outright. First time in history that's ever happened. And now Florida is in the pole position to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. Going over the numbers prior to the show and over the weekend, I think it should be pointed out that Florida right now is in a scenario where it is in position to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament for the first time ever in back-to-back seasons. For as good as the Gators were in 2006 and 2007, when that program won back-to-back national championships under Billy Donovan. The seed for Florida in 2006 was 3, and the seed for Florida in 2007 was a 1. So Todd Golden is in a situation right now where he, from a seeding perspective, has the Gators in position to be better seeds in the NCAA tournament last season and this season than they were in 06 and 07 when Billy Donovan led this program to back-to-back national titles. Obviously, a lot of basketball still to be played for this team, and a lot of basketball still to be played as obviously the Gators try to lock in a number 1 seed on Selection Sunday. From a Quad 1 perspective right now, there are only 4 teams in college basketball that have 10 or more Quad 1 victories. Florida is one of them. Obviously, Duke, Michigan, and Arizona are the others. The only way I could see Florida not being the 4th number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament is if Florida lost its first game in the SEC tournament later this week, and then also has a situation where UConn runs the table and wins the Big East tournament. Now, sometimes we see certain things obviously lead us to jump to certain conclusions. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions because UConn lost at Marquette on Saturday. I have seen UConn lose in the Big East tournament and then go on to play dominant basketball in the NCAA tournament. It happened in 2023 when UConn lost to Marquette in the semifinals at Madison Square Garden, and then UConn went on to rip through the 2023 NCAA tournament like a chainsaw through butter. Then you have to start looking at other things from a 2-seed perspective. I don't think it's likely that any of the other teams in line in the 2 position are going to be good enough to jump UConn or Florida to get to the 1 line. But there is obviously a lot to play for teams like Illinois, like Houston, and also like Michigan State, who was very, very impressive on Sunday on CBS against Michigan in a tough loss. I think those teams right now would be my 3 other number 2 seeds during the NCAA tournament. The geographics of things is really interesting for me from Houston's perspective, because I believe that of all the teams that are right now projected to be 2 seeds in the NCAA tournament, Houston has the most to play for. Because if you look at Houston, and you look at the season that Houston has had, obviously the real valley for the Cougars was the 3-game losing streak when it went against the gamut of Iowa State on the road, Kansas obviously on the road, and then Arizona at home sandwiched in between. Houston, to me, if it makes major waves at the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City this week, would be the teams among the potential 2 seeds other than UConn that could have the most to gain on Selection Sunday because of the potential geographic advantages that you're going to see in the NCAA tournament. For Houston, that would mean being in the South region and being in a scenario where it would play, obviously, in a scenario where it would play at the Toyota Center in downtown Houston. For Houston to do that, though, it would have to jump UConn. And that would, to me, would mean winning the Big 12 tournament. We're going to break down all of those things and all of those dynamics when it comes to the conference tournament brackets later in the show. One thing, too, that is really disappointing from my perspective as we continue to get ready for March Madness, for the NCAA tournament. And look, I know this is part of life. I know this is part of sports. I know this is part of all the things that go along with being in a situation where you cover sports, because there's incredible highs and there's incredible lows. I get really disappointed when there are certain teams that are having memorable seasons to remember, and they are robbed of the opportunity to play with all of their hands on deck during the most critical time of year. We had an interview, obviously, that aired on Friday with Hubert Davis. And Hubert Davis talked about the optimism that he had for Caleb Wilson to come back for North Carolina. Literally hours after that interview was taped, Caleb Wilson broke his thumb in practice, and that was lost for the season for North Carolina. North Carolina bouncing back was a great part of this season in terms of storylines in college basketball. I don't know if North Carolina could have been in a situation where it could have won more than a couple of games in the NCAA tournament, but I would have liked to have seen the Tar Heels have the opportunity to go on a run with Caleb Wilson. That's not going to happen. And North Carolina, and I talked about it last week on the show, has done a tremendous job this season dealing with injuries. Dealt with an injury to Seth Trimble in non-conference play, held down the fort. Was dealing, obviously, with an injury for Caleb Wilson, held down the fort. But long term, when you talk about being in the NCAA tournament without one of the top 5 or 6 players in college basketball, I think North Carolina will be able to win a game. Maybe they could win 2. I don't think that North Carolina could win more than 2 games in the NCAA tournament without Caleb Wilson. And with him, you are adding a player that on any given night could be in a situation where he could take a game over. That is a real downer, not just for me, but for college basketball fans. I'm still very upset over what happened with Texas Tech and JT Toppin. Texas Tech had unfinished business after last year when it had a sizable lead on Florida in the Elite Eight before the Gators came back and won an epic game in epic fashion. JT Toppin, to me, was playing like the second best player in college basketball behind Cameron Boozer. Texas Tech is not going to have a guy on the floor that was getting 21 and 11. You look at BYU and losing Robin in Richie Saunders. This is a guy who gave BYU another player who could play at an all Big 12 caliber player. It gave BYU a security blanket from a shot-making perspective around Rob Wright, around A.J. DeBonsa. I sat here week after week talking about the dynamics that went into having everything align. You got to be lucky to win a national championship and go to a Final Four. You can't be unlucky. I think about some of the other teams over the years that I've covered. Cincinnati with Kenyon Martin in 2000. Arizona losing Brandon Ashley in 2014. UCLA 27-4 in 2023. Lose the National Defensive Player of the Year in Jalen Clark to a torn Achilles. Lose Adem Bona, the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, to a shoulder injury. But this is March. And in March, you have incredible highs and you have incredible lows. We're going to talk about all of that and more when we return. Plus, we are going to check in with Michigan head coach Dusty May when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Sunday on CBS, Michigan picked up an epic win over Michigan State. Earlier today, I caught up with Michigan head coach Dusty May, and he told me he's looking forward this week to extended practice time for the Wolverines. I remember a couple years ago, Villanova had a bad injury to Colin Gillespie, and they got knocked out of the Big East tournament early. And Jay Wright told me because they got knocked out of the Big East tournament early, they had extended practice time, and it made them better for the NCAA tournament. I know you just played yesterday against Michigan State, but how much, now that you have a couple of days of practice, could it obviously help you to fine-tune those loose ends before you get to Chicago?
It's incredibly beneficial, John. But if we get knocked out early, our approach is going to be good. Now we have more time to get rested for the NCAA tournament. If we advance and play Sunday for a championship, it's going to be good because we hung another banner and did something incredibly difficult together. That's just how we choose to look at the next challenge. Whatever came before it is going to make us better, like the Duke loss. We looked at it as, man, that hurt. We really wanted to win that, but good. Now we have a chance to get better at a few things that they exposed. And so that's simply how we choose to look at the next challenge 100% of the time.
It didn't obviously affect you last year because you went to the Sweet 16 and played Auburn. But when you play in a Big Ten tournament title game, which is the last game before the selection show, you have to deal with traveling back to obviously your own campus. And then you have to go from there to the NCAA tournament. What is it like to deal with that? And does it affect your prep time for your first NCAA tournament game?
It does. You bust back, you watch the show, we were still in Indy for a long time, and we bust back and got back late that night. And I think we played in Denver on Thursday, where this year we requested for a Friday game, hoping we'd be playing on Sunday. I think that's the biggest difference. If you can play on Friday versus Thursday, But our guys, the Big Ten schedule doesn't allow you to get into any type of routine. You've got to be ready for what's next. We played in Oregon on a Saturday and played Indiana home on a Tuesday. And so you just have to get to the next thing. You have to prepare so far in advance to do well in our league. And obviously our staff did a great job of that this year. But yeah, it's that break Sunday to Thursday will seem like a spring break for our guys and for all of us in the Big Ten.
All right, that is Michigan head coach Dusty May, and obviously you will be able to hear that interview in its entirety right here on Inside College Basketball Now. We'll hit the wire on YouTube Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, so more of that to come as we continue on the road here to the Final Four. And it's interesting, too, when you look at Michigan this week. Michigan is going to Chicago to play in the Big Ten tournament at the United Center as the top seed, obviously, in the conference tournament. But this, in a lot of ways, could be a dress rehearsal of the type of trip that Michigan is going to take if it gets to the Sweet 16 in a couple of weeks. Michigan is going to be the number one seed in the Midwest, so Michigan is going to be in a situation where if it wins its first two NCAA tournament games, it will then play in the same arena where the Big Ten tournament is being held this week, the United Center in Chicago. Something to monitor. Obviously, that is also similar to why Duke scheduled the game against Michigan in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, because Duke hopes to go back to D.C. in the East Regionals here in a couple of weeks. Now, another storyline, and I know we're focused on the top seeds, and I know we're focused on who is jockeying position for position, obviously, at the top of the bracket and the bubble, and we'll get into all of that here throughout the rest of the day. One storyline that is really starting to emerge, and I was in studio all weekend, I'll be in studio every day here moving forward, and I think it's a major storyline, is that the top seeds in these mid-major conference tournaments, these teams that have dominated their respective leagues, many of these top seeds are losing early in their conference tournaments, and to me, it's what obviously makes March Madness so great and unpredictable, but it's also what makes March Madness incredibly heartbreaking. Right now, 4 teams that have won their respective conference regular season titles at the mid-major level: Central Arkansas in the A-Sun, Belmont in the Missouri Valley, Navy in the Patriot League, and CAA champion UNC Wilmington. All of those teams have already been eliminated in their respective conference tournaments. UNC Wilmington and Belmont were eliminated in the quarterfinals of their 2 respective conference tournaments. These are teams, again, that won a slew of games and never got even an opportunity to play in a championship game. And then if you're looking at Navy, a team that obviously was the best in the Patriot League this season, Navy lost in the most excruciating form we have seen so far this season during conference tournament week, because I was in studio for the game yesterday on CBS Sports Network. Tie game late. Austin Benini gets a layup. Navy's up 2. And then BU hits a shot from just inside of half court to send the Terriers right now, who are 500 going into the game, to a date with Lehigh on Wednesday night right here on CBS Sports Network to get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. That was March in a nutshell. But there's also the other side of March, the dark side of March. And that is something that continues to rear its ugly head day after day. And one thing I want to point out, and I've talked about this on different platforms, I want to talk about it here. The pressure on these top seeds in these mid-major conference tournaments has been seriously amplified over the past couple of years, because there used to be a chip for these conference regular season champions to play for, because the postseason NIT used to be down the road at Madison Square Garden in the Final Four. And I've been doing this a long time. And people would always tell me, coaches would always tell me, hey, if we can't make the NCAA tournament, we're disappointed. But if you have a chance to go to New York and stay at the Marriott Marquis and play in Madison Square Garden, that is something that can keep players, kids, and coaches motivated and hungry to keep playing and keep coaching. You take that away, and Madison Square Garden is no longer a chip, and there is no automatic qualifier anymore for regular season champions to the postseason NIT, and the burden that is on these favorites is immense. And we've got proof tonight on CBS Sports Network for the CAA Tournament semifinals. The 1 and the 2 seed are both out of this conference tournament. We have seen number 1 seed UNC Wilmington, who I just talked about, lose to Campbell, who again was below 500 when they took the floor yesterday in the quarterfinals. And we have seen number 2 seed Charleston get demolished by preseason favorite Towson, who had an underachieving season under Pat Scarry, but looked like they could beat the Knicks with the way that they played on Sunday. Towson's going to play Hofstra in one of the semifinals tonight on CBS Sports Network. Campbell and Monmouth is the other game. I'll be in studio for both. So storylines everywhere. Another storyline tonight in the West Coast Conference Tournament. We have a doubleheader in that conference tournament semifinals. Gonzaga is going to play Oregon State in one semifinal, and then in the other, it's St. Mary's against Santa Clara. Look, a lot can happen during championship week, and one of obviously the negatives of playing early in championship week is you have to sit around and wait to have everything else play out in front of you. I will say this: if Santa Clara beats St. Mary's tonight on a neutral court in Las Vegas, I think the Broncos will make themselves a lock for the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens, because that would then be 2 wins for Santa Clara over St. Mary's, and then obviously the likelihood you would expect Gonzaga to beat Oregon State. It's about as big of a game as Herb Sendek has had, and I know I said this recently when they were playing St. Mary's in Moraga at the end of the regular season, but tonight's game is about as big of a game as Herb Sendek has had since he's been Santa Clara's head coach, and he's done a tremendous job at Santa Clara. He obviously has had Santa Clara at the top of the WCC for a number of years, put players into the NBA, Jalen Williams, Brandon Pajemski. But Santa Clara, a team that's been on the bubble right now for a couple of weeks, has never been to the NCAA tournament under Herb Sendek. A win against St. Mary's tonight in the WCC tournament semifinals would change that incredibly quickly. And I think it's fascinating. 2 other title games tonight. In the SoCon, we have East Tennessee State against Furman. And then in the Sun Belt, we have Troy against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern has won a slew of games in a row. The 10 seed playing the 1 seed for a right to go to March Madness. Championship week to me is always when March Madness really kicks into high gear. We have storylines everywhere. We also want to get into the nuts and the bolts of everything that's going to happen in all the big conference tournaments. I'm going to get to those and break them down from soup to nuts when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. We are with you until 2 o'clock Eastern. It is time right now to do the deep dive into the biggest conference tournaments of the week in college basketball. So let's go right now through the top 5, which are all in the power conference level. I want to start now with the ACC. We're going to have the graphic posted here on the screen as we dive in. You can see right there, there's the graphic. Thank you right there to my excellent team behind the scenes. So you can see the top 4 seeds, Duke, Carolina, Miami, and Virginia, are all getting buys. The championship game will be Saturday night at 8:30. So the ACC tournament's always going to start very early in the week. The teams to watch right there the first day are Stanford, SMU, and also Virginia Tech. All 3 of those teams are firmly on the bubble. Stanford with Ibuka Okori had a huge win on Saturday at NC State. I think the Cardinal, who have a little bit of a weird resume because they've lost games at home this season to Seattle and also to UNLV, but also have wins against St. Louis on a neutral court, at NC State, and also have a win over North Carolina. I think if Stanford can get to a showdown with Virginia, it would be in a play-in game. That would be a scenario, I think, where Stanford, if it was able to beat Pitt, which it should, and then could beat NC State a second time, that would be another quad one win. Stanford would be making a compelling case. If Stanford's in the semifinals with a win of Virginia, I think they're a lock. SMU, who has been without a key player in guard B.J. Edwards, is also limping right now to the finish line. Louisville is waiting, obviously, in a game right there if SMU were to beat Syracuse, and then Miami would be beyond that one more round. So you're looking at the dynamics there. In terms of seeding perspective right now, Virginia's in play to be a top 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. Virginia would have to win a couple of games here to do it. I see a path for Virginia, though, to get to the championship game here and face what would likely be Duke. I don't see Carolina here beating Duke in the semifinals, but we'll see what comes to pass here. A lot of obviously interesting teams. I think if there's a team that doesn't have a double bye that you want to keep an eye on, it's Louisville, the 6th seed, but that of course depends on the health of Michael Brown. Another bubble team that has a bye is Cal. Cal, to me, if it loses to Florida State, will miss the NCAA tournament, so that's a must-win for Cal. Let's look at the Big 12 right now in Kansas City as that bracket takes form. That's going to start tomorrow. Baylor and Arizona State will be your first game. Cincinnati is going to play Utah. Now, Cincinnati is an interesting scenario because you have Wes Miller, a coach that is firmly on the hot seat, fighting for his job, but he has also coached a team over the last couple weeks that has resembled every bit the look of a bid stealer here at the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. I think for Cincinnati to be an at-large team to the NCAA tournament, Cincinnati is going to have to win 3 games. Cincinnati is going to have to beat Utah. It's going to have to beat UCF, and then it would have to beat Arizona to be a lock at-large team. I don't think Utah and UCF would be enough for the Bearcats. Other things to keep an eye on in this tournament. I look at the path right here for Houston, and I'm seeing a team in Houston that should beat whatever team they're going to play in their first game. It's going to be Kansas State, BYU, or West Virginia. And then Houston is going to get Kansas, not at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, but on a neutral court, and then potentially a game against Arizona or Texas Tech or Iowa State if the seeds do hold. I think there is a real path for Houston to be in a situation where it can play its way to the top 2 seed, which would mean a geographic advantage in the NCAA tournament if it gets to the second weekend. That would mean a game in the Sweet 16 at the Toyota Center in downtown Houston, something to keep an eye on. Let's go to the Big East tournament right now at Madison Square Garden, which will get going here on Wednesday. Your first day of games, Providence Butler, Xavier Marquette, and Georgetown DePaul. I got to tell you, and I know that this is a long, long ways out right now because Providence has to beat Butler, but it would be also very interesting, in my opinion, if after that fight we saw a couple of weeks ago at Amica Mutual Pavilion, if we see St. John's play Providence in the quarterfinals games. That would be a quarterfinal game that would be extremely emotional for both sides. Providence head coach Kim English is not expected to return next season. Obviously, there's the Bryce Hopkins dynamic. That would create an interesting dynamic for St. John's, the 1 seed in the Big East tournament for the second straight season. I'm looking at that 4-5 matchup between Creighton and Seton Hall, and I'm seeing 2 teams that could potentially be bid stealers at the Big East tournament. Now, we're going to get more into my official list of bid stealers later in this show, but bid stealers are teams that have no chance of getting an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament, but are good enough to potentially win their conference tournament. Seton Hall has not beaten St. John's or UConn this season, also lost at home to Villanova and didn't beat Villanova. But Seton Hall has proven that it can take St. John's and UConn and also Villanova to the wire. If Seton Hall wins that game against Creighton and it turns out to play St. John's in the semifinals on Friday night at Madison Square Garden, that would be a very difficult game for the Red Storm, even though the Red Storm won that game against Seton Hall to clinch the Big East regular season title. at least a share of it last Friday in Newark, and then with UConn losing to Marquette, it became an outright title. I'm looking at the bottom part of the bracket. There could be a revenge game for UConn in the quarters on Thursday night if Marquette beat Xavier. Marquette was the team, as we know, and kudos to Shaka Smart for the way he got his team ready to play on Saturday in Milwaukee. But there could be a revenge game for UConn and Marquette, and then Villanova could be in a situation where obviously it gets a shot at UConn on Friday night in the Big East Tournament semifinals at Madison Square Garden. I got to tell you, the Big East Tournament to me was always the conference tournament that wasn't really obviously the NCAA Tournament, but when I got going in this business, the Big East Tournament was just a hair below the NCAA Tournament in terms of cachet and prestige. It felt like a mini NCAA Tournament. Unless we get St. John's and UConn Saturday night in a rubber match at the world's most famous arena, I don't see a lot of overall juice right now in this season's Big East Tournament. Teams are playing for seeding. UConn obviously has a lot to play for, especially if Florida trips up in the SEC Tournament. And St. John's is still obviously a team that could play its way to a top 16 seed in the NCAA Tournament. But aside from that St. John's UConn dynamic, I don't see a lot of major storylines right now at the Big East Tournament. Let's go to the Big Ten, which will be this week in Chicago at the United Center. Obviously, everybody in a scenario now where you're making the Big Ten tournament starts really early. I think the team, in terms of the bubble situation, that is going to have to do the most work is Indiana, which is in its first season under Darren DeVries. Indiana is going to play the Penn State Northwestern winner and then would potentially play Wisconsin. I would say this, Indiana is going to have to be in a scenario where it gets past Wisconsin to feel good about its NCAA tournament chances. I think Indiana's going to have to win at least 2 games here to be in the NCAA tournament as an at-large team. Ohio State, much better shape in my opinion after the week that the Buckeyes had, beating Purdue, beating Penn State, beating Indiana, and then the 4 top seeds with the double bye. I'm looking here, and I'm seeing the bottom of the bracket as really, really interesting for a lot of different reasons. Well, first off, UCLA was embarrassed, in my opinion, defensively a couple of weeks ago at Minnesota. UCLA could get Minnesota in its first game, and then UCLA could get a crack at Michigan State on a neutral floor. Michigan State blew out UCLA in East Lansing a couple of weeks ago. And there's also a potential thing here where we could see, if Nebraska were to get obviously by Purdue, that Nebraska could play in the Big Ten tournament semifinals on CBS. Illinois, the 4 seed, another team to keep an eye on, in my opinion, that could be playing for a high 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Don't think the Illini could play their way to the 1 line, but here's things you got to remember. Michigan is locked up as a 1 seed. Illinois and Michigan State right now are in the 2 position. The teams who have gotten the double bye right now, or the triple bye, excuse me, that have gotten the spot in one of the top 4, other than Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, and Michigan State, all 3 of those teams are looking to improve their respective seed line in the NCAA tournament. Michigan and Illinois are trying to cement their place as a 2 and stay at 2. If Nebraska was able to hold serve here and beat Purdue, Michigan State, and then Illinois or Michigan, Nebraska could be a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Let's take a look right now at the SEC tournament bracket, which is obviously going to feature the defending national champion Florida Gators. The way it looks right now, Florida's first opponent will be Kentucky or Missouri. I would expect Kentucky to beat LSU. Florida, to me, if it wins 1 game, will be in great position to be the 4th number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think if Florida gets to the finals here, I think it would be an absolute lock. Bubble teams to keep an eye on in the SEC. The 12 seed Auburn is obviously one. Auburn right now is just a game over 500. I will say this, if Auburn beats Mississippi State and then is able to beat Tennessee, it will be really interesting to see what the committee does with Auburn, because Auburn has incredible wins compared to other bubble teams. Now, they have a lot of losses. a lot of losses. Right now they're 16-15. Auburn's got to win 2 games in this tournament at least to be an at-large team, but I'm going to bring up this example. A couple of years ago, Michigan made the NCAA tournament, I believe it was 2022, with Juwan Howard, was 17-15, was good enough to beat Colorado State in the first round, was good enough to beat Tennessee in the second round, got to the Sweet 16. Auburn's got to win 2 games here. And then you're looking at the lower part of your bracket. Oklahoma under Porter Moser has made a big push here to get into the bubble picture. It's still a ways away, but I would expect Oklahoma to beat South Carolina. Oklahoma could beat Texas A&M, and then Arkansas would be the third opponent for the Sooners. Those are the 2 teams you're looking at from a bubble perspective. Sean Miller and Texas, I still think, have a good amount of rope, the 10 seed, to be in the NCAA tournament. But I do want to say this. Texas, okay, cannot afford to lose to Ole Miss in its first game, because then things can happen all over the country. I saw it in 2023 when we had bid stealer after bid stealer. Other things to keep an eye on: Arkansas and Alabama played a classic game a couple of weeks ago in Tuscaloosa. There could be a rematch in that game in the semifinals of the SEC tournament. Vanderbilt's your 4 seed, but in terms of the big picture, Florida, the number 1 seed, I think will be a lock to be the 4th number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament with 2 wins. Kentucky, you might be looking at this and say, how is Kentucky with, all of its NIL and resources a 9 seed? This is what I'm going to say. How many teams in college basketball could lose their starting 1 and their starting 5, 2 players who are both at an all-conference caliber level, and then be in a scenario where they are still the same basketball team? Jalen Lowe would have been an all-SEC caliber point guard. Jaden Quaintance was an all-SEC caliber big man. Really only saw those 2 guys together against St. John's in the CBS Sports Classic in December. So I think you got to give, Mark Pope the benefit of the doubt in that regard. But lots of storylines at all these conference tournaments. We'll take our final look during the 25-26 season at what happened in today's AP Top 25. Jon Rothstein here at Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, quick timeout because we're heading into the long days of March Madness, late night West Coast tip-offs, and bracket chaos that doesn't stop if you're staying up to catch every game and grinding through wall-to-wall college hoops. You need energy that can keep up. That's where the new Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots come in. They treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity flavor with a tasty caffeine kick. This isn't your typical energy shot. It's bold, playful, candy-style chaos in a tiny bottle. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy Shots bring you tasty caffeine in 17 flavors, and this Fruity Rainbow launch is all about that sweet, colorful vibe. It's big flavor packed into a portable 2-ounce shot, easy to toss in your bag before a full day of games or keep nearby when you're locked in on a double overtime thriller. Plus, it's a zero sugar treat that's Sweet Tooth approved. So whether you're breaking down matchups or staying up to watch every buzzer beater, make sure your boost is as fun as the madness. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network with Jon Rothstein. Time now for a Rothstein reaction. Let's take a look at this week's AP Top 25 just released, and this will be the final AP Top 25 before Selection Sunday. Duke, Arizona, Michigan, Florida. I'm cool with that. Houston all the way up to 5. UConn 6. Iowa State 7. Have the Cougars a little bit higher than I do, but I don't have a problem with that for Houston. Again, that's a team that can change the trajectory of its season if it wins the Big 12 tournament. Let's hit the next one going to number 8, shall we? We'll flip the screen here. Michigan State, Illinois, Virginia. I'm fine with that. Nebraska, Gonzaga, okay. I also had St. John's at 13. Red Storm are rising under Rick Pitino. St. John's the past 2 years in the Big East, 36-4 in regular season games. Kansas is at 14. Let's look at 15 plus now. Alabama, Texas Tech, Arkansas, Purdue, North Carolina, Miami, St. Mary's. I have Miami a little bit higher. Shout out to Travis Steele for going 31-0 in the MAC. The Red Hawks NCAA Tournament seed will be obviously a major storyline on Selection Sunday. Now let's look at 22 through 25. Things get a little dicey right now. Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, Louisville, and Tennessee. Miami has fallen out of the top 25. Also some love for TCU, who's playing great basketball. I'll tell you, TCU is another one of these power conference teams that could break open a bracket and pick off a team in the round of 32. Jamie Dixon's squad has been very mercurial this season, but we have to remember, has big wins this year on its resume. TCU has beaten Texas Tech. TCU is also on a neutral court, beaten Florida and Wisconsin. We'll put a bow on this one when we return with some news and notes from around the world of college basketball. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network with Jon Rothstein. Let's close out this show with some news and notes from around the world of college basketball. We start with Big Red Magic. Nebraska finished the regular season at 26-5. Fred Hoiberg has now led Nebraska to 26 wins, which ties the school record, which was previously set by Danny Nee in 1991. If Nebraska can win just one more game this season, Nebraska will break the all-time record for wins. A reminder, this program has never been to the NCAA tournament and won a game. But if that happens before the start of next season, I will be flying to Lincoln and throwing a happy hour for 1 hour in downtown Lincoln in the Haymarket District for all of the great fans of Nebraska. So Nebraska just has to win one game in the NCAA tournament to make that happen. Nugget number 2, the Godfather settles all family business. I'm talking about Rick Pitino at St. John's. St. John's has now won outright back-to-back Big East regular season titles for the first time ever. The Red Storm are right now in a completely different stratosphere nationally than they've been really since the mid-'80s with Mullen, Jackson, and Walter Berry. St. John's the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament this week at Madison Square Garden. If you're St. John's, you are playing for the chance to be a top 16 seed on Selection Sunday. And nugget number 3, Donovan's evolution. I know I talked about this a little bit last week, but I want to hit on it again. In Donovan Dent's last 5 games for UCLA, he has 53 assists and 2 turnovers. That is an assist-to-turnover ratio of 26.5 to 1. He's playing great basketball. UCLA is downshifted to a smaller lineup. The Bruins still lack a lot on the glass and are still not a great defensive team, but UCLA has played good basketball over the last couple of weeks. It's amazing how things changed after that Illinois game where Donovan Dent went coast to coast for the game-winning layup like Tyus Edney in the 1995 NCAA tournament. Now, as it is championship week, an annual tradition is to identify the bid stealers. And if you can listen closely enough, you can hear that the bid stealers are out there. Here right now are 5 teams that I'm highlighting that I think could have the requisites to obviously not be an at-large team, but be good enough to steal a bid at their respective conference tournament. I don't see anybody right now possessing that criteria in the ACC. In the Atlantic 10, Steve Donahue has done a great job at St. Joe's. VCU is not listed because VCU is in position to be an at-large team to the NCAA tournament if it plays far enough in the Atlantic 10 tournament. Obviously, St. Joe's has 2 power conference transfers who were its top 2 scorers, Jaden Glover Toscano and also Derek Simpson, who began their careers at St. John's and Rutgers, respectively. Earlier in the show, I talked about Cincinnati in the Big 12. Wes Miller playing for a lot, trying to extend his tenure at Fifth Third Arena. Cincinnati, again, has to win, in my opinion, 3 games to be an at-large team, which would mean beating Arizona. But Cincinnati is the team to watch at the Big 12 tournament. In the Big East, Shaheen Holloway is very much a Big East Coach of the Year candidate. He has gotten blood from a stone this year in South Orange. Shaheen Holloway is somebody I think for all intents and purposes we have to look at as a guy that is capable of beating Creighton, beating St. John's, and beating UConn in 3 consecutive days. Remember, 4 years ago, Shaheen Holloway led St. Peter's to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament. 2 teams in the Mountain West, Grand Canyon has won 20 games under Bryce Drew. Grand Canyon has already beaten San Diego State, and Utah State has one of the best scorers in the Mountain West in 6'6" wing, Jaden Henley. Might actually be 6'7". He might have grown an inch since he transferred the last time. But a guy, too, who has power conference experience. Really good player to keep an eye on. And San Diego State. Now, San Diego State has not played well down the stretch, but you know what that program has done during March. They didn't win, obviously, a lot of big games in November and December. They were up and down all season long. They've got firepower with B.J. Davis. They've got, obviously, Miles Byrd. They've got Magoon Gwath. They have Brian Dutcher. They have culture. They have history. And I think those are two teams in the Mountain West Conference that you could see stealing a bid this week in Las Vegas, just like Colorado State did at the Mountain West Tournament a year ago. Nothing I see bid stealer-wise out of the Big Ten and the SEC. We've got a huge week. We've got a huge month. We've got a huge life here on CBS Sports Network and throughout the CBS family of networks. I can't believe it's March 9th. And I quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. I will talk to you Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on YouTube. I'm Jon Rothstein. I'll be in studio later tonight on CBS Sports Network. And this was Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network.